There's a reason some of the most powerful people in the world say less than everyone else in the room. Because the moment you open your mouth, you give people a piece of your mind and sometimes a piece of your power. Words can build bridges, but they can also burn them to ash before you even realize what happened. Silence is not weakness. Silence is strategy. It's the art of control. It's knowing that just because you can speak doesn't mean you should. Most people fear silence. It makes them uncomfortable. They rush to fill it with noise, explanations, excuses, and justifications. But here's the truth: silence makes them sweat, not you. Silence forces people to reveal themselves while you remain unreadable. In those moments, you're not just quiet, you're calculating, observing, gathering information. And information is power. When you keep your mouth shut, you stop giving away clues about what you think, feel, or plan to do next. You stop arming other people with the very ammunition they might use against you. Every unnecessary word you speak can be a weapon pointed at you. But when you master the discipline of silence, you make yourself untouchable. Think about it. People can argue with your words, but they cannot argue with your silence. They can misinterpret what you say, but they can't twist what you never said. Silence protects your intentions. It keeps your energy focused. And in a world obsessed with oversharing, it makes you stand out as someone in complete control. You gain more than just mystery when you choose silence. You gain time. Time to think. Time to assess. Time to let the other person reveal their hand before you reveal yours. While they are busy talking, you're busy strategizing. And the person who speaks less almost always ends up in the position of greater power. Silence is also self-respect. It's refusing to explain yourself to people who don't deserve an explanation. It's resisting the urge to defend your every move, to seek validation from voices that will never be satisfied. It's saying without saying, I don't need you to understand me to keep moving forward. And here's the real secret. Silence can be louder than shouting. The absence of words can send a stronger message than 1,000 speeches. It can show your strength, your resolve, your unwillingness to be baited into battles that aren't worth fighting. Sometimes, walking away without a word is the loudest statement you will ever make. So the next time you feel the urge to react, to explain, to fill the air with words just to ease the tension, stop. Breathe. Remember this: you don't owe your voice to every situation, and you don't owe your thoughts to every person. The less you say, the more they'll wonder. And the more they wonder, the more you win. Now it's your move. Starting today, train yourself to embrace the silence. Let others talk themselves in circles while you observe. Let them reveal themselves while you protect yourself. Speak when it counts, when it serves your purpose, not your impulse. Use your silence as a weapon, as a shield, as your edge in a noisy world. Because when you master the power of keeping your mouth shut, you don't just control the conversation, you control the outcome. Silence is strategy, not weakness, and when you truly understand this, it changes the way you operate in every area of your life. Most people are conditioned to think that speaking up, filling space, and making their presence known through words is the key to influence. But the truth is, power often lies in restraint. Silence is not the absence of something, it's the deliberate withholding of it. It's a calculated move that places you in control of the situation rather than letting the situation control you. When you speak without purpose, you give away pieces of your plan, your emotions, and your mindset. But when you hold your tongue, you keep all those cards close to your chest, forcing others to guess, to wonder, and in that wondering, you create an advantage. Weakness is often assumed when someone doesn't respond immediately, when they don't defend themselves, or when they don't fight every battle. But that assumption is almost always wrong. True weakness is reacting without thinking, being so uncomfortable with quiet that you rush to fill it with noise. The strong understand that words can't be taken back once they're out. They know that once you reveal your position, you give others something to counter. They also understand that silence gives you space to listen. And listening is one of the most underrated forms of intelligence. In the quiet, you pick up on the pauses in someone's voice, the shift in their tone, the hesitation before they answer a question. These are details you miss when you're too busy speaking just to be heard. Silence is the pause before the decisive strike. It's the moment of gathering all the facts before making your move. Imagine a chess player who makes impulsive moves without thinking 3 steps ahead. They'll lose to the player who studies the board in stillness, analyzing every piece before acting. That's what silence allows you to do in life, to study the board, to understand the dynamics, to anticipate your opponent's next move before you commit to your own. And because you've taken the time to think rather than react, your moves are sharper, more impactful, and far less predictable. The misconception that silence equals submission is one of the biggest reasons people give away their power. They feel a need to prove themselves in every moment, to correct every misunderstanding, to respond to every challenge. But what they don't realize is that this compulsion to react is what makes them easy to manipulate. When others know that all they have to do is provoke you to get a reaction, they control you. Silence flips that dynamic. When you don't take the bait, when you refuse to give them the satisfaction of a reaction, you force them to sit with their own discomfort, and in that discomfort, they begin to lose control. Silence also speaks volumes in ways words can't. Think of the last time someone expected you to argue back and you didn't. That moment of stillness can feel heavier than any shouting match. It leaves the other person uncertain, wondering what you're thinking, second-guessing their own stance. This is a psychological advantage because people fear the unknown far more than they fear open conflict. Words make you readable, but silence makes you a mystery, and mystery is magnetic. People are drawn to what they can't fully figure out. There's also a level of self-mastery that comes from being able to hold back. It takes discipline to resist the urge to explain yourself, to prove your point, or to fill in the awkward gap in a conversation. This discipline sends a message, not just to others, but to yourself, that you are in control of your impulses. Every time you choose silence over unnecessary speech, you reinforce your own strength. You're training yourself to value precision over volume, impact over noise. In situations where emotions are high, silence becomes even more powerful. When you're angry, upset, or under pressure, your instinct might be to vent, to lash out, or to demand to be heard. But these are the moments when words are most likely to be reckless and regrettable. By choosing silence, you give yourself time to let those emotions settle so you can respond with clarity instead of chaos. People who can stay silent in moments of emotional intensity project an unshakable presence. They become the steady anchor in a storm while others are tossed around by the waves. Silence is also strategic in negotiations, whether they are in business, personal relationships, or everyday interactions. When you make an offer or ask a question, the temptation is to fill the silence that follows, but if you do, you weaken your position. Those who can sit in that silence, letting the other person speak first, often come away with more favorable outcomes. People hate the weight of silence so much that they'll talk themselves into a corner just to break it. This is where your patience becomes your advantage. Even in leadership, silence is a sign of strength. A leader who listens more than they speak earns the trust of their team because people feel heard, and when they finally do speak, their words carry more weight. The scarcity of their speech gives it value. Just like any rare commodity, what is rare is respected. If you're constantly talking, constantly reacting, constantly explaining, your words lose impact. But when you choose them carefully and sparingly, they have the power to shift a room. Silence can also protect relationships. Not every thought that crosses your mind needs to be spoken. Not every irritation needs to be voiced. Sometimes, holding back can prevent unnecessary damage. Once certain words are said, they cannot be unsaid, and no apology can erase the memory of them. By choosing silence, you give yourself the chance to assess whether what you're about to say will help or harm the situation. This doesn't mean suppressing your truth. It means delivering it with timing and precision so it lands effectively instead of destructively. In a world where everyone is shouting for attention, the person who can remain silent stands out. The noise around you is constant. People posting, tweeting, live streaming every detail of their lives, desperate to be seen and heard. But true influence doesn't come from broadcasting every thought. It comes from knowing when to speak and when to hold back. Silence is rare in a noisy world, and rarity always commands attention. When you master silence as a strategy, you also master the art of pacing yourself. You don't waste energy on meaningless debates or on trying to change the minds of people who have already decided not to understand you. You save your voice for the moments that matter, for the battles that are worth fighting. And because you've saved it, when you finally speak, it cuts through the noise like a blade. People stop and listen, not because you demand their attention, but because your restraint has already earned it. Silence is not about avoidance. It's about engagement on your terms. It's about choosing to speak when it strengthens your position and staying quiet when it doesn't. It's about understanding that your voice is a tool, and like any tool, its effectiveness depends on how and when you use it. Silence sharpens that tool. It makes your words count when you finally decide to use them, and it ensures that when you do speak, it's with purpose, precision, and impact. People reveal more when you say less, and once you truly grasp this, you'll realize you've been missing one of the simplest yet most powerful ways to understand others. Most people think communication is about talking, but the truth is, the most valuable part of communication is listening. And not just listening to words, but observing everything that comes with them. When you choose silence, you create a space that pulls more information out of people than you could ever get by filling that space with your own voice. Human beings are uncomfortable with quiet. That discomfort pushes them to speak, to fill the gaps, to share more than they planned. And when you aren't interrupting, over-explaining, or rushing to respond, you catch every detail they let slip, both intentionally and accidentally. When you speak too much, you reveal more than you think. You give away your position, your emotions, your priorities, and you distract yourself from hearing what's happening on the other side. But when you say less, you make the conversation about the other person. You give them the stage, and once they're standing on it, they often can't resist performing. They talk to fill the silence, they elaborate to make sure you understand, and in that over-elaboration, they hand you information they might have otherwise kept hidden. This is one of the oldest tactics in interrogation, negotiation, and even sales, because it works. When someone is speaking, they are not only revealing facts, they are revealing themselves. They're showing you their thinking patterns, their emotional triggers, their fears, their priorities. The more you let them talk, the more you can see where they hesitate, where they light up, where they get defensive. These moments tell you far more than their words alone. The way they pause before answering a question can show uncertainty. The way their tone shifts when a certain topic comes up can expose a sensitive area. These cues are almost impossible to catch if you're talking as much as they are. People are more likely to underestimate you when you stay quiet, and that underestimation works in your favor. If they think you're disengaged, they're less guarded. They might think you're not paying attention, so they stop carefully controlling what they say. That's when the truth starts to slip through. People naturally want to be heard, and when you provide that space without crowding it with your own voice, they'll often keep talking just to keep your attention. It's in those moments, when they've run out of rehearsed lines and carefully chosen words, that you see who they really are. Silence also creates a psychological pressure most people can't handle. In a conversation, we're trained to expect a back and forth rhythm. When you break that rhythm by not responding right away, you create a pause that makes the other person anxious to fill it. The longer the pause, the more they scramble to come up with something to say, and in that scramble, they often reveal information they didn't plan to share. That's why some of the most skilled negotiators simply wait after making an offer or asking a question. The other person will often start talking themselves into a weaker position just to end the uncomfortable silence. Observation thrives in silence. You hear the little shifts in tone that tell you if someone's confident or unsure. You notice the way they change the subject when they're trying to avoid something. You see how their body language either matches their words or completely contradicts them. These subtle signals are missed by people who can't stop talking long enough to notice. But when you commit to saying less, you become a collector of these details, and those details give you an edge in understanding exactly who and what you're dealing with. It's not just about noticing others, it's about giving them enough space to expose themselves. If you're in a disagreement and you rush to defend yourself, you might never hear the real reason someone is upset. But if you hold back and let them keep talking, they often reveal more than they intended. The surface reason might be something small, but the real issue, The one that's truly driving their emotions only comes out after they've had time to dig deeper into their own thoughts while speaking. Your silence gives them that space. In professional settings, the ability to say less can make you stand out as someone who's deliberate and measured. When you speak only after fully hearing the other person, your responses are sharper and more relevant. People start to realize that when you do speak, it's worth listening to. This elevates your presence in the room. They'll begin to measure their words more carefully around you because they know you're truly paying attention. That awareness often makes people even more intentional with what they share, and sometimes in trying to be careful, they accidentally give away more. This doesn't mean you should be stone-faced or completely disengaged. It means your focus is on gathering, not broadcasting. You can still nod, maintain eye contact, and show you're listening without rushing to fill the silence with your own stories or thoughts. In fact, showing you're listening without speaking makes people more comfortable opening up. They feel understood, which encourages them to keep talking. And the more they talk, the more you learn. The beauty of saying less is that you also avoid the trap of revealing your own vulnerabilities too soon. The less you disclose, the harder it is for others to use anything against you. At the same time, you're gaining insights that allow you to choose your words with precision when you finally do speak. Every statement you make is then based on a clear understanding of the other person's mindset rather than assumptions. This makes your words far more effective. Whether your goal is to persuade, to protect yourself, or simply to understand the truth, people will often tell you exactly what you need to know if you let them. They'll give away their strategy in an argument, their priorities in a negotiation, their insecurities in casual conversation. But they won't do it if you're competing with them to be heard. They will if you're quietly giving them all the space they need. Silence is not passive. It's an active choice that shifts the balance of power in your favor. By saying less, you invite others to fill the gap, and in filling it, they reveal themselves more fully than they realize. Words can be weapons against you, and the danger is that most people don't even realize when they're handing over the very tools others can use to harm them. Every time you speak, you give away pieces of your mind, your intentions, your emotions, and your vulnerabilities. The wrong person will take those pieces, rearrange them, twist them, and use them to their advantage and to your disadvantage. Once words leave your mouth, you cannot control where they go, how they are interpreted, or how they are repeated. They can be misunderstood, misquoted, or deliberately distorted, and none of that is within your control once they're out in the open. That's why restraint in speech is not just about being polite, it's about self-preservation and strategic thinking. In moments of tension, people are often driven by the need to be heard, to defend themselves, or to explain their position, but in doing so, they often give away more than they need to. When you rush to fill the silence with explanations, you may accidentally reveal your emotional state, your insecurities, or the limits of your knowledge. Even casual remarks can be taken out of context and brought up later as evidence against you. The smallest slip can be amplified, and what you intended as harmless can be turned into something damaging. That's the unpredictable nature of spoken words. They can be reframed and weaponized by those who know how to manipulate them. In professional settings, this can mean losing leverage in negotiations or damaging your credibility. A single poorly timed comment can alter how others perceive you, even if the intent was harmless. People might interpret your words as weakness, arrogance, ignorance, or overconfidence. Once that perception is formed, it is difficult to reverse. In personal relationships, words spoken in the heat of an argument can inflict wounds that linger long after the conflict is over. An impulsive statement made in anger can destroy trust, and while forgiveness might be possible, the memory of those words often remains. This is why self-control over speech is an essential part of protecting your reputation, your relationships, and your opportunities. The danger isn't only in what you say intentionally, but also in what slips out unintentionally. Offhand remarks, sarcastic jokes, and small confessions can seem insignificant in the moment, but may be remembered and brought up later in ways you never anticipated. A manipulative person can twist your casual words into something they can use to discredit you or undermine you. This is why being mindful of your speech is not about paranoia. It's about understanding that the more you say, the more potential ammunition you provide to others. There is also a subtle psychological element at play. When people know they can provoke you into speaking without thinking, they can control you. They can push certain buttons, bring up certain topics, or use certain tones to get you to react emotionally. Once you're reacting emotionally, you're no longer thinking strategically. You're revealing your thought process in real time, and that gives others the ability to anticipate and counter your moves. They can use your own words to trap you, to make you contradict yourself, or to paint you into a corner. Being aware that words can be weapons means you start to choose them with intention, if you choose to use them at all. You begin to recognize that silence often serves you better than trying to correct every misunderstanding or counter every false statement. By staying quiet, you deny others the ability to twist your responses. You avoid creating sound bites that can be pulled apart and used against you. Silence keeps you in control of your narrative because you're not giving anyone material to distort. It's also worth understanding that some people actively listen for weaknesses in your speech. They are not hearing you to understand you. They are hearing you to find something they can use. This is why oversharing, even in seemingly safe environments, is risky. Trust is earned, and until it is fully established, you should be selective about what you disclose. Information, once shared, cannot be taken back. It can be passed along, altered, or stored away until the right moment for it to be used against you. Even when your intentions are good, words can still become weapons in the wrong hands. A well-meaning piece of advice can be reframed as interference. An attempt at humor can be painted as an insult. A statement made in confidence can be repeated publicly. The truth is that you do not control how others choose to interpret or present your words, so the less material you give them, the safer you are. This is not about living in fear of speaking. It's about speaking with discipline and awareness. The most skilled communicators understand that their words are like currency, and they spend them carefully. They know that once a statement is made, it's like a written contract, permanent in the minds of those who heard it, even if they later forget the exact wording. That impression can be lasting. If your words are careless, your image suffers. If they are deliberate, they enhance your presence and authority. The less you say, the more others have to rely on what you do, and actions, when consistent, are far harder to twist than words. There's also the matter of how words can travel far beyond their intended audience. In a digital world, private conversations can be recorded, messages can be screenshot, and verbal statements can be retold to people you never intended to hear them. What you thought was said in a safe environment can be repeated in a completely different context, stripped of its original meaning. This reality makes it even more critical to measure what you say and to understand that anything you speak could potentially reach ears you didn't anticipate. Keeping in mind that words can be weapons changes the way you handle confrontation. You start to recognize that winning an argument in the moment might cost you far more later. You learn to think long-term, to weigh whether speaking now benefits you later or simply gives someone more to use against you. Often, the best response is no response, not because you're conceding, but because you're refusing to arm your opponent. Restraint in speech also gives you the element of unpredictability. If you're someone who always reacts, people can read you easily. But if you control your words, they can't be sure what you're thinking, how you'll respond, or what your next move will be. This uncertainty forces them to tread more carefully, which in itself is a form of power. The less predictable you are, the harder it is for anyone to strategize against you. When you fully embrace the idea that words can be weapons, you stop viewing silence as a gap that needs to be filled. You begin to see it as a shield, one that deflects attacks before they even happen. You become more intentional about every statement you make, more aware of the potential consequences, and more skilled at protecting your position. Your words become sharper, more precise, and far less frequent. But when you do choose to speak, they carry weight and authority because they are not diluted by constant chatter. Silence buys you time, and time is one of the most valuable resources you have when it comes to making decisions, responding to challenges, and positioning yourself for the best possible outcome. In a world that rewards speed, people often overlook the advantage of slowing down, of resisting the urge to give an immediate response. The moment you speak, You commit yourself to a position, and once that position is out in the open, you can't pull it back. But if you stay silent, you keep all options on the table while you gather more information, evaluate your choices, and prepare your next move with clarity rather than impulse. When you choose silence, you create a buffer between what's happening around you and how you respond to it. That buffer is where strategy is born. It's where you ask yourself the questions that matter. What is the real issue here? What are they not saying? What am I missing? How might this play out if I respond one way versus another? Without silence, those questions don't get asked, and you end up reacting based on surface-level information instead of understanding the full picture. This pause, no matter how brief, is often the difference between making a move that works for you and making one that works against you. Time allows emotions to settle. When something happens that triggers you, an insult, a challenge, a sudden demand, your first instinct is often emotional, not rational. That emotion can be anger, defensiveness, fear, or even excitement, but in every case, acting on it immediately can lead to mistakes. By holding your tongue, you give yourself the space to let that first emotional wave pass. When the emotion settles, your thinking becomes clearer and your judgment improves. You're no longer reacting from a place of instinct, but from a place of intention. Silence also gives you the opportunity to see how others will fill the space. In conversations, negotiations, and even conflicts, people hate gaps. When you don't rush to respond, you force the other person to keep talking. In that extra time, they often reveal more than they intended, make concessions without you asking, or expose flaws in their own argument. You gain the advantage simply by waiting, because while they're filling the silence, you're collecting valuable information that you can use later. In negotiations, this is one of the most powerful tools you can use. After you make a proposal or ask a question, resist the urge to speak again just to break the tension. Let the other person process. The discomfort of the pause often pushes them to start talking, and in doing so, they may give you exactly what you need. They might lower their demands, offer more than they planned, or try to justify their position in ways that give you insight into their priorities and weaknesses. The person who can stay quiet the longest in these moments usually walks away with the better deal. Time also gives you a chance to consider the long-term impact of your words. It's easy to win a short-term battle by saying something sharp, witty, or cutting, but if that victory damages a relationship, undermines your reputation, or closes doors you may need open in the future, it's not really a win. Silence gives you room to think beyond the immediate moment and weigh the cost of what you're about to say. This ability to think ahead is one of the key traits that separates impulsive people from strategic ones. There's also a psychological benefit to holding back. When you don't rush to respond, you project confidence. People notice when you're not in a hurry to explain yourself, justify your position, or prove your worth. It sends the unspoken message that you are in control, that you operate on your own timeline, not someone else's. This changes the power dynamic in your favor. Others start to wait for your input rather than expecting it immediately, and that waiting increases the weight of your words when you finally choose to speak. Silence buys you time, not just to think, but to observe. In that space, you can read the room, notice body language, pick up on shifts in tone, and sense changes in energy. These details can tell you more about the truth of a situation than the words themselves. People reveal a lot in their reactions while they're waiting for you to speak. You might notice someone's nervousness, their eagerness, or their uncertainty, all of which can inform how you respond and give you leverage in shaping the outcome. This ability to wait before responding also helps you avoid traps. Sometimes questions are designed to corner you, to make you commit to a statement that can be used against you later. If you answer too quickly, you might miss the hidden intention behind the question. Silence gives you time to spot these traps, to think about what's really being asked, and to choose a response, or no response at all, that keeps you safe. In high-pressure situations, time can be the difference between success and failure. People who panic tend to act quickly and often make mistakes they regret. Those who can hold steady, stay quiet, and use the pause to think through their moves tend to come out ahead. This is why elite professionals, whether in law enforcement, negotiations, or leadership, are trained to slow down under pressure rather than speed up. The more intense the situation, the more valuable that extra second or two becomes. Silence also allows you to control the pace of interactions. When you respond instantly, you're letting the other person set the tempo. They control the rhythm of the conversation, and you're playing catch up. But when you pause, you take control of that rhythm. You decide when the exchange moves forward, and that subtle shift can give you the upper hand without the other person even realizing it. Controlling the pace keeps you in command of the interaction and ensures that you're not being pulled into reacting on someone else's terms. The time you gain from silence can also be used to gather outside information. If you don't respond immediately, you can fact check, get a second opinion, or seek advice from someone you trust. This makes your eventual response not just more measured, but also more informed. You're not operating solely on your own assumptions. You're incorporating multiple perspectives, which strengthens your position and reduces the chance of making costly mistakes. There's a reason some of the most effective leaders and negotiators in the world are also the ones who speak the least in critical moments. They understand that silence is not passive, it's active, intentional, and full of purpose. It's the mental space that allows you to align your emotions, your strategy, and your desired outcome before you make a move. That alignment is what ensures your words and actions have maximum impact when you finally decide the time is right to use them. Silence can speak louder than words, and when you understand how to use it, you realize it can deliver a message far more powerful than anything you could have said out loud. There is a weight to silence that words often cannot match. When used with intention, it becomes a statement in itself. One that commands attention, creates curiosity, and leaves an imprint on the minds of those who witness it. In many situations, the absence of words is not emptiness, but emphasis. It's the difference between noise that fades and a moment that lingers. Silence has the ability to make people lean in, to wonder, to think harder about what is happening and why you're choosing not to speak. Sometimes the strongest response you can give is no response at all. People expect reactions. They expect you to explain, to defend, to argue, to meet their energy with equal or greater force. When you choose not to give them what they expect, you break the rhythm they're counting on. That disruption forces them to adjust, to question, to fill in the blanks themselves. And often, what they imagine in that space is far more impactful than anything you could have spelled out for them. In this way, silence becomes a mirror. People project their own assumptions, fears, or guilt into it. Silence can also convey strength in a way that talking never could. In a heated moment, most people get louder, faster, and more aggressive with their words. If you can remain still and silent in the middle of that storm, it shows unshakable composure. It communicates that you are not rattled, not desperate, not willing to be pulled into chaos. That calm in the face of pressure sends a message that you are in control, and control is power. People remember the person who stayed composed when everyone else was losing their footing. In relationships, silence can draw boundaries more effectively than long explanations. You don't always need to tell someone why you won't tolerate certain behavior. Sometimes the act of disengaging, of not entertaining the conversation, of walking away without a word, makes a stronger point than hours of discussion. Words can be debated, negotiated, or dismissed. Silence, on the other hand, cannot be argued with. It stands on its own, undeniable and complete. It says, without saying, that the discussion is over and the line has been drawn. In professional environments, silence can build authority. Leaders who are comfortable with silence in meetings, interviews, or negotiations often create a sense of gravity around themselves. People lean in when they finally speak because they've learned that silence is not emptiness. It's intentional. Those who fill every gap with chatter dilute their influence, but those who hold back until the right moment amplify it. In these cases, the silence before you speak works like a drum roll. It builds anticipation, making your words more powerful when they finally arrive. Silence can also be an act of resistance. When someone is trying to provoke you, to bait you into an argument, or to push you into saying something you'll regret, refusing to engage takes away their control. They can't twist words you never said. They can't feed off an emotional reaction you didn't give them. They are left to sit with their own words, their own energy, their own discomfort. And in that void, they often reveal more about themselves than they would have if you had engaged. Your silence becomes a shield, absorbing their attacks without giving anything back. The impact of silence is often heightened because it's rare. In a world where people are constantly talking, posting, and sharing every thought, the act of holding back becomes noticeable. It stands out. People are drawn to what they don't fully understand, and silence creates that intrigue. When you don't explain everything, when you leave certain questions unanswered, it invites people to think about you, to wonder, to speculate. That curiosity can be a form of influence because the less they know, the more they fill in the gaps themselves. And those assumptions often work in your favor. Silence can turn the tables in a conversation. If someone is trying to dominate the discussion, your quiet presence can make them overextend themselves. They talk more, they reveal more, they try harder to convince you of their point, and in doing so, they may weaken their own position. Silence allows you to collect all that information without giving away anything in return. It shifts the balance so that they are doing all the work while you remain steady and composed. In moments of conflict, silence can be more disarming than confrontation. If someone is shouting at you, arguing, or accusing you, they expect pushback. They are prepared for it. What they are not prepared for is silence. When you don't respond, they are left to wrestle with their own words. The lack of reaction can make them question whether their point is valid, whether they've gone too far, or whether they've lost your respect entirely. Silence forces self-reflection in ways that arguments never could. Even in positive contexts, silence can add power. When someone shares something important or emotional with you, sitting in silence instead of rushing to respond can give their words the space to breathe. It shows you're listening deeply, that you're processing what they've said, rather than simply waiting for your turn to talk. That pause can make the other person feel more heard and understood than any immediate response could achieve. In this way, silence builds connection and trust. Silence is not the absence of communication. It's a different kind of communication, one that works on a deeper and often more subconscious level. People feel it, they sense it, they react to it, even if they can't explain why. It can inspire respect, curiosity, and even a bit of fear, depending on how it's used. It has the power to shift dynamics without you having to lift a finger or raise your voice. When you master silence, you master an invisible form of influence that others may never fully understand, but will always feel.